All right, guys, had a comment, lake turnover. I'll be honest with you guys. This is the one subject that I have refrained from talking about on YouTube. I try and only talk about stuff I really know about. The lake turnover is probably the one thing in fishing that there's a couple things in fishing I don't really know. I wouldn't consider myself an expert. Now, I don't think an expert is the guy that has a PhD. Could care less about that. I don't care that somebody has a marine biologist, went to school for all that stuff. I'm not saying they don't know what they're talking about. It's just they could tell me everything in a science book. I don't tell you everything in a science book. I tell you the 20 years that I've been on the 20 years I've really been on the water. Okay, like really, I was fishing for 30 years, but I'd say for 20 is when I really started to understand how everything works. So when I tell y'all stuff about spawning fish or fall transitions or wintertime fishing, and I talk about live scope now, it's not because I read a book on it or someone told me. It's just because my experience with it. And I got a lot of experience with a lot of this stuff. Fall turnover. The fall turnover is talked about. I truly don't understand it in this aspect. I know what it is. I understand what happens. And I could give you all the scientific, I couldn't give you the scientific definition, right? In layman's terms. So there's basically two levels of water, right? You got the upper level of water and the lower level of water. And eventually what happens is those things start to switch, right? Whether it be, it's usually in the fall, usually when it gets cold, right? Colder water is denser, right? And so what happens is a lot of times that water starts to change, right? Change levels. And when it does, the water in the summertime, as it gets hotter and hotter, the oxygen gets higher and higher in the water column. I've done tons of videos about this. This is why fish school, like late in the summer when it gets really hot. They school because the shad get higher to the surface. Even as hot as it is, it's not like the fish go deeper. No, the shad actually get close to the top because there's more oxygen to the top. And so as the shad get close to the top of the water, fish school on them easier, okay? It's a thermocline thing. So in May, the thermocline is really low. As the summer gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and the water gets hotter, the thermocline usually rises, okay? And eventually there's a fall turnover because we start getting cold fronts, the air temperature cools down the water here, and it starts to switch. When it switches, this is what I know. That water down here, the water that they're not in a lot of times, or even if they are in it, that water starts to mix and it starts to move up and down. And when it does, the oxygen gets all crazy. The thermocline gets eliminated because it all switches. It brings up a lot of the water that they don't like to be in. Let's call it the non-oxygenated water, okay? That water starts getting to mix, and what happens is the whole lake, or I don't want to say the whole lake, where it starts to happen, right, starts to get real funky. Now you can see it a lot of times because sometimes your lake gets this weird, I don't want to say muddy, but dirty. You can see it. It looks funky. Funky, great word. It looks funky. It looks like this dirty. Sometimes you can see it. If you ever see your lake that has a lot of sediment on the bottom, like silt and stuff, you'll see that junk come up with it. So you'll see that stuff floating around. A lot of times you'll see like these crazy mud lines and silt. So a lot of lakes do this. If you're on a clear lake, probably doesn't do it, or a rocky lake, you probably don't see this. But on a lot of lakes with silt on the bottom, you'll see that silt rise, and like the nasty stuff that's on the bottom will come up. It bubbles up. You'll see bubbles all over the lake, bubble trails. Like you can tell it's different. What happens instantly? Everyone starts talking about fishing gets tough. Now, the fishing gets tough. It does. It does get tough. I'm going to tell you why it gets tough. I don't know why anyone else is going to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you why it gets tough. But it does get tough, and it gets weird, and the fish really don't know what to do. And it becomes a lot of what we kind of catch them junk fishing, kind of catch a lot up shallow. Really hard to catch them deep when this happens. And it's really hard to catch fish. Now, why is it hard to catch fish? If you're probably listening to this first time, this is going to sound like a crazy person. This isn't even crazy. This is like the most, this is so obvious to me, it's crazy, and I can go 1,000 different examples. And if y'all want to hear more about it, I've made some videos, I'll make some more. Fish don't feed because they're hungry. Okay? I'm gonna slow this down. I'm gonna say it one more time, because I just said it. I have no problem saying it again. Fish don't feed because they're hungry. They're not like us. We eat because we get hungry, right? That's why we eat. Now, why don't we eat? What's the one time that none of us want to eat? Ever. It's when we're sick. Get the flu. Get the flu, get a cold, get whatever it is, get to feeling sick, where you can't get out of bed, and what do? You can eat some crackers maybe, you might drink a little bit. How many of y'all have lost a bunch of weight? Y'all haven't eaten in days. You're sick. You don't feel like eating. You don't feel like doing much. Bass get sick. Yes, they get sick from viruses and things like that. Water quality hurts fish more than anything else. I don't care what anyone ever all that stuff about handling fish and putting them in a live well and all that's for whatever. I don't care about any of that. Listen, fish get sick and don't eat because of water quality. Your lakes that you live on, when fishing is good, it's not because of pressure, it's not because guys haven't had tournaments, because the water quality was good. And I've done this with fish in my fish tank, and you can look at any lake in the country. Those lakes aren't good because they stocked them better or any of that stuff. Great water quality. You put a bunch of floods in there, a bunch of droughts, a bunch of different things, water quality gets bad. But if you got everything freaking top notch, the water quality is good, and a fish will eat dang near 24 hours a day. Like, all it thinks about is eating. So where we eat and we get full, that's why fish will have something sticking out of its mouth and it's still trying to eat something else. It's full. It's just continually thinking about surviving. Like, that's what they think about. We know we can go to the grocery store in 6 hours and get something to eat. That fish has no idea if it's ever going to eat another meal again, so it better get the next meal in front of them. When they're feeling good, that's all they want to do is eat. They just eat 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. When the water quality is bad, they stop eating. Fall turnover, the water quality is bad. They stop eating. That's why fishing gets tough. It's not because you're not putting a bait in front of their mouth. They just don't want to eat. And like I said, I used to have fish tanks. When that water quality would get bad, I could have everything in there. The fish could swim right in front of my bass's nose. It would not eat. It didn't care. I could change the water, and that bass is freaking up there swimming around trying to kill everything in that freaking tank. It only stopped eating because of the water quality. Turnover does that. So, how do we fix that? Now, I don't want to say fix it. What do we do with that? Well, my suggestion is find the best water you can. That's very hard to do. And here's why. It's obvious in those lakes I talked about where you can see it actually rise up. You can see the silt rise up. You can see the turnover happen in front of your eyes. You can see it. I don't believe you can see it on some of those clear lakes. I don't know if you can see it. It's hard to say when it happens. I'm not even going to say it happens on every lake all the time. I'm not 100% sure of that. I don't know. I've never had anyone actually say that. Everyone in fishing likes to use terms that they've heard of without really knowing if it's true or not. Fishing's tough. Oh, it's a fall turnover. Maybe the lake's turning over. We just kind of maybe assume that might be happening is why we're not catching fish. I'm not saying they're not right. I'm just saying they might not be right all the time. They might not really know. So I don't really know if the turnover happens on every lake. I know one thing. I can say this because I can see it. you can see the turnover happen in parts of the lake and not in other parts of the lake. Like it'll happen in stages. So if you can see that, better get out of those places where you can see it and get to places where you don't see it. So that's why I said, find places where it's not happening. You know, when I was at Lake of the Ozarks the other day, it seemed like one section of the lake was so much better than the other section. It was like night and day. I started thinking about that. And some people said, what about the fall turnover? And I was going, you might be right. That might have been what was going on at Lake of the Ozarks on that one side of the lake. Because I'd never seen that lake fish that hard. And it was just different. It was real different. I remember them I've never seen them this scattered. I've never seen them like a little bit up shallow, not really deep. They were like in between. And it just didn't seem like no one really caught them that good on that side of the lake. And the other side of the lake was like crushing it. And the lake turnover. I was like, that might have been what it was. Now I can't visually see it. Lake of the Ozarks is pretty clear. I don't know. I haven't had a lot of researchers like really tell me. I've never heard a lot of content on it. So, but I do know it's a thing. Just don't know if it's a thing everywhere. But it could be happening. And if it is, you got to wait. And how long do you have to wait? Hopefully within a week or two. You know, I will say maybe it doesn't affect really, really shallow places like way up north. So and when I say way up north, if your lake runs that way, most of the time towards the river is shallower and towards the dam is deeper. So, you know, my suggestion sometimes is go to that section of the lake. Go to sections of the lake that don't have a ton of deep water for this to happen in. And I think when you got a lot of shallow water and you don't have really any deep water nearby, that turnover really doesn't happen because there's no thermocline in 10 foot of water or less. Usually you need a lot deeper water. So that's my suggestion on the turnover. Maybe there's probably some guys that will make some comments. I'll be interested to read them about some of the things about what they've heard on it. That is my lake turnover. It's a tough time. Like I said, get into some creeks, get into way up the lake, get in places that don't have a lot of deep water, and try there for a while. Stay out of that water until it starts to settle. And when it settles, it's usually good again, and those fish go to biting again. They go to biting again because the water will correct itself. But I'm telling you, you can do whatever you want to when it's that turnover is in bad shape. And it's not that you're not throwing around fish. They just sit. They got the flu. They got the turnover flu. Might be what this video is called, the turnover flu. I like that. I'm not going to call it the other thing because, that might get me banned. The turnover, I'm not even going to say the word. Y'all know what I'm talking about. We ain't call it that. We don't talk about that. All right. See y'all guys.